Hey guys, I'm going to read you a little bit of Ramona the Pest. We'll start where we ended last time. Ramona, who longed to run to her father and show him where her tooth used to be, thought a while before she said, "We guessed what Miss Binny had in a paper bag that began with a T, and Davy guessed caterpillars." "And what else happened?" asked Mr. Quimby, all set to be patient. Ramona could not tell her father about the tooth, and she was not going to tell about pulling Susan's curls. Nothing much was left to talk about. "We learned tea," she said at last. Mr. Quimby gave his daughter a long look, but said nothing. After dinner, Beezus talked to Mary Jane on the telephone, and Ramona heard her say, "Guess what? Ramona is a kindergarten dropout." She seemed to think this remark was very funny because she giggled into the telephone. Ramona was not amused. Later, Beezus settled down to read a book while Ramona got out her crayons and some paper. "Beezus, you don't have a very good light for reading," said Mrs. Quimby, and she added, as she always did, "You only have one pair of eyes, you know." Here was an opportunity for Ramona to show off her new kindergarten knowledge. "Why don't you turn on the donzer?" she asked, proud of her new word. Beezus looked up from her book. "What are you talking about?" she asked Ramona. "What's a donzer?" Ramona was scornful. "Silly, everybody knows what a donzer is." "I don't," said Mr. Quimby, who had been reading the evening paper. "What is a donzer?" "A lamp," said Ramona. "It gives a lee light. We sing about it every morning in kindergarten." A puzzled silence fell over the room until Beezus suddenly shouted with laughter. She means," she gasped, "the Star-Spangled Banner." Her laughter dwindled into giggles. "She means the dawn's early light." She pronounced each word with exaggerated distinctness, and then she began to laugh again. Ramona looked at her mother and father, who had the straight mouths and laughing eyes, the grown-ups, who were trying not to laugh out loud. Beezus was right, and she was wrong. She was nothing but a girl who used to be a kindergarten, and now she got everything wrong, and she made everyone laugh. She was a stupid little sister, a dumb, stupid little sister who never did anything right. Suddenly, everything that had happened that day was too much for Ramona. She glared at her sister, made a big crisscross motion in the air with her hand, and shouted, "Cross out Beezus." Then she threw her crayons on the floor, stamped her feet, burst into tears, and ran into her room. "Ramona Quimby," her father said sternly, and Ramona knew that she was about to be ordered back to pick up her crayons. Well, her father could order her all he wanted to. She was not going to pick up her crayons. Nobody could make her pick up her crayons. Nobody. Not her father or her mother. Not even the principal. Look at this picture of her. "Now, never mind," Ramona heard her mother say. "Poor little girl, she's upset. She's had a difficult day." Sympathy made things worse. "I am not upset," yelled Ramona, and yelling made her feel so much better that she continued, "I am not upset, and I'm not a little girl, and everybody is mean to laugh at me." She threw herself on her bed and pounded her heels on the bedspread, but pounding on the bedclothes was not bad enough. Far from it. Ramona wanted to be wicked, really wicked, so she swung around and beat her heels on the wall. Bang, bang, bang! That noise ought to make everybody good and mad. "Mean, mean, mean!" she yelled in time to hear her drumming heels. She wanted to make her whole family feel as angry as she felt. Mean, mean, mean! She was glad her heels left marks on the wallpaper. Glad, glad, glad. "Mother, Ramona's kicking the wall," cried Tattletale Beezus, as if her mother did not know what Ramona was doing. "It's my wall, too." Ramona did not care if Beezus tattled. She wanted her to tattle. Ramona wanted the whole world to know she was so bad she kicked the wall and left heel marks on the wallpaper. "Ramona, if you're going to do that, you had better take off your shoes." Mrs. Quimby's voice from the living room was tired but calm. Ramona drummed harder to show everyone how bad she was. She would not take off her shoes. She was a terrible, wicked girl. Being such a bad, terrible, horrid, wicked girl made her feel good. She brought both heels against the wall at the same time. Thump, thump, She was not the least bit sorry for what she was doing. She would never be sorry. Never, never, never. Ramona, Mr. Quimby's voice held a warning note. Do you want me to come in there? Ramona paused and considered. Did she want her father to come in? No, she did not. Her father, her mother, and nobody could understand how hard it was to be a little sister. She drummed her heels a few more times to prove that her spirit was not broken. Then she lay on her bed and thought wild, fierce thoughts until her mother came and silently helped her undress and get into bed. When the light had been turned out, Ramona felt so limp and tired that she just fell asleep. After all, she had no reason to try to stay awake because the Tooth Fairy was not going to come to her house that night. The next morning, Mrs. Quimby walked into the girls' room and said briskly to Ramona, "Which dress do you want to wear to school today?" The empty space in her mouth and the heel marks on the wall above her bed reminded Ramona of all that had happened the day before. "I'm not going to school," she said, and reached for her play clothes while Beezus put on a fresh school dress. A terrible day had begun. No one said much at breakfast. Howie, who had recovered from his cold, stopped for Ramona on his way to school and then went on without her. Ramona watched all the children in the neighborhood go to school, and when the street was quiet, she turned on the television. Her mother turned it off, saying, "Little girls who don't go to school can't watch television." Ramona felt that her mother did not understand. She wanted to go to school. She wanted to go to school more than anything in the world, but she could not go back when her teacher did not like her. Ramona got out her crayons and paper, which someone had put away for her, and settled down to draw. She drew a bird, a cat, a ball, and then with her red crayon, she crossed out the cat because it did not belong with the same sound as bird and ball. Afterwards, she covered a whole sheet of paper with cues, Ramona style, with whiskers and ears. Ramona's mother did not feel sorry for Ramona. She merely said, "Get your sweater, Ramona. I have to drive down to the shopping center." Ramona wished she had a dime from the Tooth Fairy to spend. There followed the most boring morning of Ramona's entire life. She trailed along after her mother in the shopping center while Mrs. Quimby bought socks for Beezus, some buttons and thread, pillowcases, a new electric cord for the waffle iron, a package of paper, and a pattern. Looking at patterns was the worst part. Ramona's mother seemed to sit for hours looking at pictures of boring dresses. At the beginning of the shopping trip, Mrs. Quimby said, "Ramona, you mustn't put your hands on things in stores." Later, she said, "Ramona, please don't touch things." By the time they reached the pattern counter, she said, "Ramona, how many times do I have to tell you to keep your hands to yourself?" When Mrs. Quimby had finally selected a pattern and they were leaving the store, who should they run into but Mrs. Whistler, a neighbor. "Why, hello!" exclaimed Mrs. Whistler. "And there's Ramona! I thought a big girl like you would be going to kindergarten." "How old are you, dear?" asked Mrs. Whistler. Ramona still had nothing to say to Mrs. Whistler, but she did hold up 5 fingers for the neighbor to count. "5?" exclaimed Mrs. Whistler. "What's the matter, dear? Has the cat got your tongue?" Ramona stuck out her tongue just enough to show Mrs. Whistler that the cat had not got it. Mrs. Whistler gasped. "Ramona!" Mrs. Quimby was thoroughly exasperated. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whistler. Ramona seems to have forgotten her manners." After this apology, she said angrily, "Ramona Geraldine Quimby, don't you ever let me catch you doing such a disgusting thing again." "But Mama," protested Ramona as she was dragged toward the parking lot, "she asked me, and I was just showing." There was no use in finishing the sentence because Mrs. Quimby was not listening. Mrs. Quimby and Ramona returned home in time to pass the morning kindergarten straggling along the sidewalk with their papers to show their mothers. Ramona got down on the floor of the car so she would not be seen. Later that afternoon, Beezus brought Mary Jane home from school to play. "How did you like kindergarten today, Ramona?" asked Mary Jane in a bright, false tone. It told Ramona all too clearly that she already knew Ramona had not gone to kindergarten. "Why don't you just shut up?" asked Ramona. "I'll bet Henry Huggins isn't going to want to marry a girl who hasn't finished kindergarten," said Mary Jane. "Oh, don't tease her," said Beezus, who might laugh at her sister later. Ramona went outside and rode her 2-wheeled lopsided tricycle up and down the sidewalk for a while before she sadly removed Miss Binny's red ribbon, which she had woven through the spokes of her front wheel.